What's up, everyone? It's Matt Mrozik, and I want to do a video of the last paint up that I just did. This is Sandman, printed in quarter scale. This is printed by Bon Norden, same guy who printed the He-Man for me, and Angela, and a bunch of other stuff that clients have sent to me. The file's by Epic Prop. I'll put a link down in the description so you can find the link to this. It's a Patreon. Apparently there's two different versions depending on your level of Patreon subscription. So this particular file only comes with one head, and it comes with a right hand or switch out. I guess if you're a level higher in the Patreon, you actually get a second head, which has a transformation feature, which looks really, really cool. I've seen it where he's half human and half sand. I kind of mimicked that a little bit here. I'll zoom in and show you that here in a little bit. I want to give a shout out to Jeremy Posse or Posey. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. But anyway, he has a build up on his YouTube channel. I'll link to it below. It's a much smaller version. I'm assuming it's 1/6 scale or even smaller. But I picked his brain about doing the sand technique and everything. And even though I didn't use his method, he was very helpful as far as like how he did it and stuff. So I just want to kind of give him a shout out for answering my questions. And I'll go over how I did the sand technique on this one. And I'll tell you why I didn't use Jeremy's method. And it has to do with the size of this thing. So anyway, again, this guy's quarter scale. For size, he's big. So from the bottom to the top, he's 33 inches tall, roughly. Take about half. I've got a little. He's on a turntable, so it'll take half an inch. So 32.5 inches tall. Really, really tall. Depth wise, he's about from the back about 20 inches, and the width, I don't know if to measure, probably from the base. I'm going to get in front of the camera here. I'd say about 20. So the base is about 20 by 20 by 20. Height is about 32.5 inches tall. Big piece. It's relatively simple, to be honest, but it did take me a while. I'll have a little over 55 hours into this, building and painting it. And again, it's mostly in the building process because it's a 3D print. So the way it came in pieces was the base was 5 pieces. There's 4 on the bottom, and there's a top part. And then we have 1, 2, 3 pieces of like steel strapping, I guess. We've got 2 pipes and a manhole cover. And then, like I said, the right hand is a switch out. We got the spike ball or the hammer. I like the hammer personally. I'll put that on here on a second. As far as Sandman, he comes in. The hand is a piece, the legs, the torso, the head. And like I said, there's an option for switch out if you're a certain level of Patreon. This arm and then the 2 switch outs. So not a lot of parts, but again, when you're dealing with these big 3D prints, specifically the bases, trying to get things lined up is tricky. This lined up pretty good. I kind of concentrated when I was lining up the 4 bottom parts. I was concentrating on trying to match up the sculpt. So the top, when everything was said and done, the top was misaligned probably by a centimeter or so. So when I put this part on, I had to do some sanding and sculpting to get it all blended. It works out in the end. It's just, it takes time and you got to do some work. So really, really fun piece to do, simply because I saw Jeremy's paint up. He made a comment in my work in progress post and posted a photo of his. So I reached out to him and I really like your sand. How'd you do that? So he sent me a link to his video. And again, I didn't use his method simply because of the size of this thing. The way Jeremy did his pieces, he used PVA glue or Elmer's glue, watered it down, and basically painted glue on the base and then used real sand in the glue. And it looks great, but this thing is so damn big that I think that's just not feasible for this size. I would have to have like a huge, he recommended doing it outside because it is messy. And the method I did is messy. My floor's a mess, but not nearly as messy if I was using white glue and sand. But his looks great. So I just kind of, but I found several artists on YouTube that do texture painting. And there's a couple methods on there that they were using. They were actually just mixing sand in with acrylic paint. Again, I thought about doing that, but I just figured that wasn't going to be durable enough for this. So the technique I used is when I was at Hobby Lobby buying stuff to do this, I found this stuff. This is it's called Liquitex Basic Acrylic. It's their coarse texture medium. So it's a medium. It's like an acrylic medium, but it's got granules in it, and it's not sand in there. It's actually acrylic beads of whatever the material. So I did some research on like what is this stuff. It's actually acrylic granules. So I took this and I mixed in. I bought some railroad ballast. I didn't buy sand because the ballast is a bigger grit. It's more coarse than sand, and I figured it fit the scale better than using sand. And so I mixed the coarse medium with railroad ballast, and I actually did mix in some color. I used Vallejo medium flesh tone, and you're like, oh, flesh tone, but it's actually it was the perfect color to do what I needed to do. So it took 2 applications of the sand. So what I did first is after I got everything built and everything, I got him painted. And by the way, his face looks one of my favorite portraits I've done. I keep saying that I'm just getting better at skin tones with every build, and this is actually one of my favorite portraits. I think the skin tones are spot on. Anyway, so after I got everything built and painted to the point where I was ready to do the sand, I basically I glued his pants to his torso because there's a gap. I wanted to fill that gap. I painted those while those are together. The base and the hand and the switch outs were just in primer. I actually didn't paint those. That's probably one thing I would do different. I think I'll be doing another one of these. Someone just reached out to me about doing another one. So if the thing I'll switch up is before putting on the sand texture, I'd actually base coat the base and the arm and the switch out. It worked out in the end. I do kind of like it because there are a few little spots here and there where you can kind of see the primer through. And it just gives another tonal variation, which I think works. Unless I just pointed it out, anyone who just saw this in person would think it's flawless because it looks really good. But there are a little few spots in here and there where I can see the primer, but I think it actually adds to it. So it's something I'm going to think about. So once I got everything to where I was ready to do the sand, I mixed up the texture medium, the railroad ballast, and the paint just to a consistency that I thought would work. And I just started putting it on. I just used a brush that I don't mind getting rid of. I put it on everywhere on the switch outs. This is before I put anything together. The base, the hand, that switch out, and the other arm. And I went to go like pick up my son or something, or did something for about an hour. And it had dried like completely. I was like, sweet. I thought it would take like 24 hours to dry. So once I did the first application, then I glued everything on. So everything is glued together except for these switch outs. And to get this effect where he's turning into sand, you have to glue them together. Because if the arms came off and he came off the base, you would have a terrible, terrible seam, a gap that just would look weird. So to sell the effect that he's turning into sand, he's glued to the base. The arms are glued to his torso. The head is glued in. The pipes are glued on. Everything is glued together to sell that effect, because the second round of sand, as I mixed that whole thing up a little bit thicker, and I really went in and started kind of burying after the pipes were glued in, and also where it all keyed in, I went in and just packed those gaps and those seams filled with the sand texture, just kind of built it up on all the items. So there's like little bits of sand in here, because he's swirling, it's turning into sand. And I kind of brought that out in the paint. You can see he's kind of swirling up, he's turning into sand. So like on the manhole cover, I built it up around the edge, and I'm going to come in tighter, but I'll just kind of explain what I'm doing. Buried the ends of the pipe, these steel beams, got a little bit of sand coming out of the pipe. One thing Jeremy did on his, since it's a small, he actually hollowed out the pipe, which is a good idea, but this thing is so big. I just left it solid and painted it, and it looks good. Just filled in around all the gaps, packed in that sand texture, just to bury the things, because it should be covered in sand. It's like a tornado of sand. And where it really makes a difference is his legs and the arms. So I've seen a couple other paint ups as far as like what they did, and I just kind of used theirs as a guide as far as what to do, because I've never painted a Sandman. and it's kind of a challenging thing to do because sand is pretty boring. You know, it's usually really monotone. If you look at it, most sand is one color. So the challenge was to kind of bring out the shape of the skull and keep the sand texture and still sell the idea that he's sand and turning into sand. I think this worked out well. So yeah, just packing in that sand texture around the arms where they go to the torso and around the legs, just packing this in because I wanted to have this going up his body and into the arms like he's turning into sand. And I think it sells the illusion or the idea that he's turning into sand pretty well. So let's come a little tighter and we'll look at some of the details. We'll look at the head first. Actually, we're gonna come here. So now, from what I see, his head's looking a little pink in the video. It's not quite that pink in person. It's really a natural, nice skin tone. But you can see I kind of did some sand around the neck. This is before I glued the head, and I just put a little bit of the sand texture around his neck, up on his ear a little bit, and it's up underneath his chin. Jeremy covered the entire face in sand, which I wasn't a fan of, and my client was same way. I don't want that. Now the green shirt, it looks like it's green and black stripes, but it's actually green and like a dark green. So it's not black. It almost looks black, but there's green in there. So once I got the lighter green painted, I hand painted those stripes, which took a long time. And then I did some additional shading once the stripes were done. So coming here, you can see the sand kind of going up the side, turning into his arm. Same thing on this side. You can kind of see the sand. I put the sand texture going up his body and up his arm. Now this print wasn't perfect. So I'm going to reach out to Bond because I am going to do a second one. There were some, and he did some putty work before he sent it. So I'm going to tell him not to do any putty work on the next one because it creates more work for me to try to fix someone else's putty work. I would just have to deal with it myself. So there was a pretty good, you can tell where there was a shift in the print. And it was from here across this whole part of the torso. So I did create some texture stamps from other parts of his body and try to recreate the texture. It was semi-successful, but I knew I was going to do the sand technique, so I just kind of left it and just covered as much of it in sand as I could without being obnoxious. So it works out, but there, it's not a perfect print. So I'm going to reach out to Bond and see if he can make sure to either support that area more or do something to try to help void that shift because. And again, there's a couple areas where the print's not perfect, but you do what you can do where you're not spending a crap load of time working on something that's not going to be worth the extra time or cost to your client. So yeah. So then if we come down, I'll come into his face. Let's make it. There we go. That's looking pretty good. And as we come down, I'll show you the switch out. I'll switch this out real quick. So I did put there's a 1/2-inch magnet in here, and these things are heavy. I mean, it's hollow, but the print's got a lot of weight on it. And I actually went through 2 tubes of this stuff. I almost thought I'd have to get a third, and it's not cheap. It's like $9 a tube. So I went through 2 tubes of that for the sand texture. I almost thought I was going to do 3, but okay, let's see if I can get this in here. But these magnets are strong enough to hold the switch outs. And before I did the sand texture, I actually went and masked off like the key. I masked the keys off on the arms and the hammer and the switch outs, and I put putty in the keyholes for the stuff on the base just so I wouldn't get that in the keys. But I like that hammer better. And as we work our way down, the pants are dark brown with some nice shading, kind of a reddish brown to mimic the comic. Depending on which comic you look at or which illustration, the colors kind of vary. The metallic on the pipes look really good. I started with that like a blue steel. A bluish steel, and did some weathering and rust effects. A lot of it got hidden by the sand, but as I turned it here in the light, You can kind of see those cool effects. That bluish steel with the rust turned out really, really nice. And then we come down here, and you can see some of the shading where I just kind of try to accentuate the sculpt to give that sense of twisting and turning, and he's turning into sand. And these are pretty simple. It's just a steel color with some weathering. I just put some worn yellow paint to give it like a warning stripe look. Same thing with this pipe. Same technique as the first one, kind of a bluish steel with some. And to get this effect, it's really simple. It's actually really fun to do, and it's a crazy easy technique, and it looks great. It doesn't have to be difficult to do to get really cool worn metal. I get a lot of compliments on my metal and metallic work, and it's really easy. It's just I do a lot of stippling, a lot of dry brushing back and forth with washes and stuff. So it's not hard. It just, again, takes time. You have to kind of look at things, and I typically will paint and weather things in the way they would be painted or weathered naturally. So I usually make it look brand new first, and then I go in and start weathering it. So yeah, you can see I just built up all the sand around the manhole cover, kind of buried the ends of these steel beams. But yeah, so there you go. Sandman, big piece. So the second one I'm doing has to be shipped. So it's going to be challenging after the He-Man fiasco with the base being destroyed. But in order to get this whole effect of him turning into sand, he's got to be glued together. Otherwise, I say you're going to have these huge seams and gaps, like the legs and the arms and things. So he's got to be glued together. So shipping's going to be challenging. We have to figure something out. Maybe invest in black foam, which is not cheap, but it may be the smartest thing to do. But there you go. Really cool piece. Again, files by Epic Props. I'll put the link down below. I'll leave down to Jeremy's video down below so you can see his paint process and how he did the sand. Yeah, really good. Don't ask me what the colors are and everything because it's all custom mixed. For the sand, like I said, I'll show you. I do know the colors. Actually, I just finished it up. So the flesh tone, the Vallejo medium flesh tone is mixed in with the coarse medium and the railroad ballast. I then went in and misted just very lightly over the whole thing, a little bit of the medium flesh tone, just to kind of fill in some spots that were a little thin. And that kind of turned to yellow, and I was kind of freaking out, like, oh, it's really yellow. But I knew I was going to do some more work. And then I went in with highlights. I went in with Vallejo color Iraqi sand. So this is like the highlight color. Hopefully that's in frame. So Iraqi sand, number 70.819. Did that for the highlights. Then I went in with some shadows. I did model color brown sand, 70.876. And all my model color paints, I thin with Mr. Color Thinner. So when you thin it with this, it sprays like a lacquer. It's really good. And then the last bit of shading, I went in with my good old trusty, my favorite wash, Vallejo Model Wash Oiled Earth. This is like my go-to for like a lot of my shading. It's like the perfect combination of brown, black. It just works. It's phenomenal. It's like my favorite, one of my favorite. I go through this a lot. When I go to the hobby store, if they have it, I buy it all because I go through it so much. There you go, guys. No work in progress videos on this just because I get to the point where I just got to kind of work and do stuff, and it slows me down a little bit. But I did want to show a video of this because I'm really proud of it. I think it turned out fantastic. I was a little skeptical before I did all the shading and stuff because it was pretty flat overall. But just going in with that shading, the shadows, and highlighting, it just really, I think, gives a sense of motion and like he's turning into sand. It looks great. I'm super happy with it. I know my client's going to love it. Luckily, he's semi-local. He's in Houston, and he drives up and picks a few pieces up and drops stuff off. So it's been working out real well for me and him. But there you go. Thanks for watching, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Hope everyone has a great holidays, and stay safe. Bye. Bye.